Okay,
Are we expecting Beverly?
Beverly did indicate that she was coming back from New York City, but that she would probably log in on phone first. But I think she might be a little bit late.
so let's get started anyways.
Oh, I see her coming in right now.
There you go. Wait and you shall receive. You okay, Beverly? You can see your chin.
Oh, okay, I'll fix.
There we go.
Now we see
That's
your
it.
hand.
How's this?
Great. You can see the rocks and
We
everything.
just got home and it's really cold, so I'm gonna have some coffee here. I'll be right back.
Okay. All right. Don't start anything. All right. Well, we're going to get going anyways. So I'd like to call the planning board meeting of January 20th to order, quorum being present. Introduction of planning board members and staff. So David Rosen, Doug Cook, Jane Ramson, our senior member, Hank Carl, Greg Catamatori, Gemma, Sean Henry, John Judd is not on staff right now, and of course Beverly Bookin, and my name is Rick Noonan, Chair. So this meeting is being recorded by video and audio in accordance with state open meeting law pursuant to section 20 of chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. This meeting will be conducted by remote participation. Additionally, all votes taken by the planning board during this and future remote meetings will be held by roll call vote. If there is a public comment period, and if you are calling in on a phone, you can press *9 to request to speak. If you are watching on a computer or a device, there is a raised hand button that you can press to request to speak. I'm going to forego the other bits and pieces. Greg, are we okay taking Joel out of order here?
Yeah, that's entirely at your discretion.
That's fine with me. So we're going to move to the first part of our posted agenda this evening, continued public hearings. And we are going to move down to the third item on the agenda, which is pursuant to section 20 of chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, in accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, chapter 48, section 9, Mass General Law, chapter 41, and the Gloucester zoning ordinance, section 5.9, cluster development. And the rules and regulations governing the subdivision of land in Gloucester. The Gloucester Planning Board will hold a remote public hearing to definitive subdivision application submitted by Upper Banjo Pond LLC. Upper Banjo Pond LLC. There's no pond in there, I'm sorry. For the division of land to permit a 26 family residential development at 154A, 158R, and 160 Essex Ave, Assessors Map 218, lot 38, 39, and 46. So I will open that meeting, public hearing, the continued public hearing, and at the request of the applicant, we are going to accept, or at least I will accept a motion to continue to the February 3rd meeting. Joel?
Sounds great. Thank you.
Yep, so moved.
We have a motion and a second for a continuance.
Second.
Beverly, thank you for that. Roll call vote, please, Mr. Catamatori.
Member Noonan,
Yes.
member McCarl,
Yes.
member Bookin,
Yes,
member Cook,
Yes.
member Henry,
Yes.
member Remsen,
Yes.
and member Rosen.
Yes.
And I just wanted to also on this evening, Bill Ross from New England Civil Engineering Corps is here. He is the board's peer reviewer for the project. He did supply the applicant with a second review of the plans, basically the revised plan set that Joel had mentioned at the last meeting. So they are in hand with those comments, and it looks like hopefully over the course of the next 2 weeks, we will put the applicant and the peer reviewer together to clarify any of Bill's comments. And then, Bill, if you wanted to just introduce yourself, I'm not sure if the board's seen you in a while.
I'm Bill Ross, New England Civil Engineering out of Salem. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Bill. Name to a face.
I'll be
So
seeing you
you've
again in a couple
continued
weeks,
that.
hopefully.
Yep, so you've continued that, and we will certainly make myself as well as other staff involved in the review from engineering, public works, fire available for a review meeting in the interim.
And Greg, I have a question about the timeline for the next meeting. When do you need to have the information be back to you so that you can distribute it?
I mean, typically it'd be nice to have a week for the board to review things. Maybe towards the end of that week prior would be ideal, which gives us essentially next week to try
Right.
to come back again in 2 weeks. Be happy to try to set something up early in the week to try to give everybody as much time to be able to respond.
Okay.
The next regular meeting of the board is on February
Sorry, 3rd. Yeah.
3rd.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks,
you.
gentlemen. Okay, so we're going to move back up to the top of our continued public hearings pursuant to, thank you, Greg. Pursuant to section 20 of chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 in accordance with the provisions of Master General Law, chapter 41, and the rules, regulations governing the subdivision of land in Gloucester, the Gloucester Planning Board to consider a 3-lot definitive subdivision application titled Back Shore Place, submitted by Frank Tedesco for a subdivision of land to permit 3 lots at 227 Atlantic, Assessors Map 26, at Lot 50. I believe Mr. Judd is with us this evening.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, John Judd, engineer with Gateway Consultants, representing Mr. Tedesco for this 3-lot subdivision. I think at our last meeting on the 6th of January, we explained the proposal for the improvements to the existing driveway and for the access into the larger portion of the property. I think there was a few things that Greg was going to look into with with staff of various departments and so forth, and I think he was going to report back to the board. I believe also that Deb Ellison is on the meeting tonight. If there's any legal questions, there were some questions as far as the conveyancing and so forth and covenant that may have been associated with the property in the past. So at your pleasure, Mr. Chairman, if I can answer any questions, or Deb is here as well.
Sir, and Greg, there were a couple of things that you wanted to.
Yep. So I did confirm with the fire chief, they did review in particular their code compliance with fire access with the understanding that the road is fairly limited by the conservation jurisdiction. So it will be expanded to a 20-foot width, which is acceptable to them. There's no issue with vertical clearance. And they provided the swept path analysis to demonstrate that the department's largest equipment can navigate the turnaround. There was one comment, again, something that's probably more of a field kind of measurement upon construction to ensure that there's no interference of the swept path analysis with the location of the terminal fire hydrant, which again, I think is a fairly minor thing. There are no specific comments from the engineering department on the engineering design. The fire chief also indicated that I think one of the conditions that they would like to see is that the structures will have residential sprinkler systems that'll be tied into their alarming system. And I also just wanted to confirm, because the question was asked, whether these will be in fact single family home rather than 2-family. But other than that, there's no further comment from staff.
Greg, can you just back up a little bit on the sprinkler comment?
Yes, because of kind of the distance, the remoteness, the fire chief is recommending that the structures have residential sprinkler systems.
And are they well-based, or are they city water?
This will be served by public water. So they'd be served by public water rather than a reservoir or otherwise.
Okay. And we don't see that a lot, John. Obviously, there's plenty of water deliverability to the site as far as the main servicing the 3 units.
That's correct. Yeah, the Mr. Tedesco prefers to have the hydrant out there for that very reason, fire safety. So if that's a condition of the board, then that's what we have to live with.
But I was more concerned about, typically when we see a requirement for residential sprinkling, it's based on inadequacy of water supply, and it's generally a well-based system.
I agree. And so we have a hydrant here.
Yeah,
Not sure why Chief Smith is making that recommendation on this particular one. I know we did it on Coles Island where we
Right.
had issues out there with the access to water and water pressure, but I don't believe that's the case here. We have, and we're going through the expense of bringing out a 6-inch water line with the hydrant for this very reason. So
right. That's what I was getting to. So yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to defer to the chief on that one. Any other questions from the board? Jane, I'm sorry. I don't know why I say Jane and look at Beverly.
Okay.
Beverly,
I can't remember the reason why the applicant has indicated that there'll be single family, even though by code they could do 3 duplexes. Is that something that a condition of approval should be imposed? I'm just not quite sure what to do with that piece of information.
I'll let John take that one first, and then if Deb wants to weigh in.
yeah, I think the issue, if I could, Mr. Chairman, was the question about inclusionary housing for subdivisions over 6 units. So I think that's where the whole
I got you.
discussion started.
Yeah.
Not that he's trying to avoid it, but this is only a 3-lot subdivision. It's not something that is more of an intense use. So he'd rather not have any restrictions on it, but again, it's at the decision of the board. He doesn't intend to sell these or have duplexes or anything larger built out here. So that's not his intent.
The only thing I'd like to add to that, this is Deborah Ellison, Ellison Law Office, 63 Middle Street, Gloucester,
Thank you.
is even as single family homes, it might be likely that people would want to put in accessory dwelling unit for a nanny or for an in-law apartment. And so we wouldn't want that to be precluded if there is a condition saying that it has to be single families, but allow that use also.
Yeah, I think those are accessory to single family. So there's no prohibition on that, but I thought that the original description of the application was in fact 3 single family. It could have been part of the testimony. So that's why I just asked for the clarification.
And I think that is their intention. And I agree with you that the ADU is accessory. I just wanted to make
Yep.
that clear.
Okay. I could, if that's a condition of the board, that recognizing that there will be 3 single family homes, there could be language added that says exactly that it shall not preclude the ability to pursue accessory dwelling units.
Thank you very much.
But is that necessary or preferable? I just don't know. I raised it only because I couldn't remember why the applicant raised that issue.
I think it was also raised in the context of the waivers that were requested. There's limited infrastructure being provided. There's a difference between 6 units and 3 units. There is, no sidewalk being provided. Obviously, there's not as much of a network out at the street, but I think it was offered kind of in the balance of also some of those waivers that were requested.
Then it seems to me a condition of approval would be appropriate if others agree. I just wanted to make sure we had a little discussion about that. Thank you.
So Beverly, are you clear then on the lack of condition and that an ADU is not precluded?
I absolutely agree about that.
Mhm.
But if the reason that the applicant is willing to commit to single family dwellings because of a more minimal infrastructure system, then we could make that a condition. On the other hand, if that's what's being proposed, it's going to be whether it's a condition or not. So I want to just raise the issue to make sure that we didn't need to have that in order to have the outcome that we want. And I think you could go either way on it.
Well, I would
But I
just agree
certainly
that,
agree on the AD.
I would agree
I
that you
agree.
would need to have it as a condition, because otherwise, the zoning permits otherwise. There's
Okay,
5 units could be constructed without the concern that they might have in terms of inclusionary. So if it's 3, it's 3, it's conditioned with the ability to have accessory.
then I agree with that. Thank you.
Before we move on to that, I'd like to take more comment. I think Mr. Rosen had his hand raised, and we'll recognize Jane.
Jane, fine for you to go first if you want.
My space bar stopped working. I couldn't unmute myself. I was just responding to Beverly. I was going to respond to Beverly, but Greg made my point. But you know, as Beverly pointed out during the last meeting, this is essentially a, you know, shared driveway by 3 residences. And I totally agree with the fact that I'm fine with granting some of these waivers because it is essentially a shared driveway. And my only concern was the fire hydrant. So if the fire chief is signing off on the distance from the fire hydrant, as long as we do put conditioned residential sprinklers, I'm fine with that. But I did have one lingering question. I can't remember if I already knew this or not, but is the road private or is it intended to be public?
As approved, it will be private. It would have to be petitioned to become public. And I think often in the weighing and the balance of whether or not the city is going to accept a road as public is potentially its connectivity, whether it's kind of a private road open to the public. This is a situation with a dead end that is unlikely to fall into that category, that it's only to provide access to these 3 lots.
Right. So is that something that's conditioned or it's mentioned in the
There is a process for approval or acceptance, I should say. That's a petition to the city and acted on by the city council. So I don't know that there's anything that can necessarily preclude the ability for somebody to pursue that process. But it's you know, part of the balance is the consideration of the waivers that have been granted and whether or not there's connectivity, those types of things that should be considered.
Right. So I guess I'm saying it's assumed that it's private unless somebody
Yes.
makes an application for.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yep.
And I guess just to follow up on Jane's point of a private road, so there, and I can't remember that we've seen a, you know, snow storage, snow removal plan necessarily that we typically see on those types of things, but you know, being private, that's, you know, the homeowners association or, you know, the homeowners group. Is that a correct assumption, John?
That's correct. Yeah, it is typical with these 3-lot subdivisions. The homeowners just sort of get together. You know, as you know, in a common driveway situation, there would be a covenant that would be entered into, indicating that it is in fact a private way and would not be relying on any city services, et cetera. This is a situation where the neighbors are probably just going to get together and share plowing fees. And I don't think there's a need for any covenant or snow removal. There's obviously plenty of room out here.
And so I'm only reflecting on Silver Court, so thank you.
Go.
Mr. Rosen.
John, I apologize for having missed the meeting in January. When you presented this last fall, you talked about a surface for the road that was going to be permeable. Is that still the same?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the way
Okay.
it was approved by the Conservation Commission, David. And there's a section view on sheet 3 of 3 that shows that. But it's going to be 20 feet wide in a pervious asphalt.
Okay, I looked at that parking lot at Wellspring after
Okay,
you
yeah.
told us about that. So, and the last question I have is all the excess land, is that going to be encumbered with a conservation restriction or not? And how's that going to be held legally?
That was a question that one of the abutters brought up at the last hearing. And the way it was addressed, David, is that the Wetland Protection Act would preclude any kind of development there. Anything inside the buffer zone that they wanted to do, that would have to obviously get approved by the Conservation Commission, but certainly no access into that wetland or building within that wetland, which is the greater part of lot, which shown as lot 3. So it's naturally protected by the laws of the Commonwealth and the Wetland Protection Act. So the answer is no, there is no conservation restriction, but there is, as you know, laws that prohibit any kind of building there.
And the lot lines, I'm not looking at the plan at the moment. Is the lot lines extend through those wetland areas, or that's actually set aside separately from the rest of the lots?
Yeah, it's pretty much entirely within the, as you drive in on the lot on the right, that extends all the way back. That large wetland is all part of lot 3. There is no
Okay.
wetland. Well, there's a very small amount of wetland with different series, which is at the back of lots 1 and 2. Thanks, Greg. You can see it there.
Okay, so it looks like it's held by lot 3.
Correct.
It's all part of lot 3. Okay, that answers my question. Thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions from board members? Beverly, go ahead.
That just doesn't preclude the owner of lot 3 putting that in conservation easement, right? I mean, which is not a land use issue for us. Am I correct in that they can do that and reap whatever benefits from the state that having a conservation zone allows them to have? Is that correct?
They can, but they wouldn't get much of a tax write-off. David
Okay.
might have more expertise on that than I would, but it does not, Beverly. They could always
Okay.
donate that to Greenbelt. There is some Greenbelt land around, but the answer is you are correct.
Okay.
The only other thing I'd like to add about that is when you're talking about small parcels like this, it's very hard to find someone to hold that conservation restriction because there isn't any, real benefit to them, to the holder to do that. So I think it would be difficult to find someone in this situation.
I was just under the impression that you could put it into a tract just to underscore that it's a no build area and that the individual property owner could then get a tax write-off for that portion of the site was my understanding, but I'm not that knowledgeable about Massachusetts law. I just want to raise that the owner of that lot does have a little bit of leeway to deal with conservation zone, but nothing that would allow any development within it or in the buffer zone. So I was just raising that.
David, do you want to take a editorial crack at that one?
Yeah, I mean, there would, as John mentioned, there would be no, if the owner of lot 3 wanted to put a conservation easement on that property, there would be no income tax benefit from doing that. There might be a property tax benefit from doing it because there's not really any loss in value from doing it. However, if somebody bought the whole property and wanted to keep it as an estate lot and put a restriction and give up the development rights on lots 1 and 2, they could likely get a very significant tax deduction, income tax deduction from doing that. So it's, there is the potential for conservation restriction there if some of the development rights are actually given up. But, this plan represents the highest and best use from an appraisal standpoint before the property is encumbered by any restrictions. And then if it's encumbered by a restriction on any either 1 or 2 of those lots, then there would likely be a significant value diminution and they could claim a charitable deduction. I'm not so sure that I would agree with Deb, Attorney Ellison's conclusion that that a conservation group might not accept that as a gift if somebody wanted to, if the owner of lot 3 wanted to hive that off. I've seen smaller parcels accepted by conservation groups, but that's a moot point, really.
Right. We've obviously way overstepped our bounds on the planning board here, but thank you for your input and thank you for answering Beverly's question. So we are in a public hearing setting, and we are talking about a definitive subdivision plan. So if there's anybody in the audience in the attendees list that would speak in favor, I'd ask you to raise your hand electronically, of course, and just state your name and address for the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And anybody that's in favor of this subdivision at 227 Atlantic. Seeing none. Anybody that would like to speak in opposition or have any other concerns about the subdivision, definitive subdivision at 227 Atlantic Road, please electronically raise your hand. Again, state your name and address for the record, and will be recognized for 3 minutes. Seeing none. Any other further comments from the applicants? So Jane, you want to make a motion to close the public hearing?
I move that we close the public hearing for the 3-lot definitive subdivision application to permit 3 lots at 227 Atlantic Road, Assessors Map 76, Lot 50.
Thank you. Need a second, please, Mr. McCarl. Thank you. So indicated. Roll call vote, please.
Member Noonan,
Yes.
member McCarl,
Yes.
member Bookin,
Yes,
member Cook,
Yes.
member Henry.
Yes.
Member Remsen,
Yes.
member Rosen.
Yes.
Any further discussion by board members on 227 Atlantic Road?
I'm happy to make a motion that we approve the waivers. Is that the first thing to do?
I think the waivers are approved by inclusion.
You could probably make a fairly inclusive motion if you'd like.
Okay,
I've kind of kept track of, it sounds like, based on the testimony, that this would also be conditional upon 3 single-family homes, not including accessory, that they would be constructed with residential sprinkler systems, and I think, and then the approval of the waivers as they've been articulated on the plan set.
yes. Were they articulated on the plan set?
Yes.
I'll second.
1, 2, 3, 4. So, okay, so I make a motion that we approve the application for a 3-lot definitive subdivision at 227 Atlantic Road, Assessors Map 76, Lot 50, with the 2 conditions that Greg mentioned and the 6 waivers that are listed on the plan.
We have a motion and a second.
Second.
Thank you, Hank. Roll call vote, please.
For Noonan,
Yes.
member McCarl,
Yes.
member Bookin,
yes,
member Cook,
Yes.
member Henry,
Yes.
member Remsen,
Yes,
member Rosen.
Yes.
Okay, it's unanimous.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Thank
Attorney
you all
Ellis.
very much. Appreciate it.
Very much.
Before you announce the next agenda item, I think I noticed that there's a couple of folks that maybe logged in later on the meeting. The 3rd public hearing for the project at Upper Banjo off of Essex Avenue. The applicant was present at the beginning of the meeting and continued to the next regular meeting of the board on February 3rd in the event that anybody was in the audience for that item.
Thank you, Greg. So next on the agenda this evening, continued public hearings pursuant to section 20 of, oh boy, here we go. Section 20 of chapter 20, can't see that, Greg. Section 20 of chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 in accordance with provisions of Mass General Law 40A, section 5, and the Gloucester zoning ordinance, section 1.11, the Gloucester Planning Board, to consider the petition submitted by Jeffrey Calder-John, amend the Gloucester zoning ordinance by rezoning 44 and 44R Concord Street, Assessors Map 229, Lot 5 and 2, approximately 6.25 acres of land from R20 low to medium residential district to EB, extensive business district. So I'll open the public hearing, which has been continued from our last regular meeting. We do have representation here in the form of Attorney Nestor. The floor is yours, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the board. Since we had the
Chairman?
last hearing, I understand that we had the site visit a week ago, and then Mr. Rosen went out to do an individual one today. Another number of questions asked at the site visit. One of the questions that was raised is we do intend to go forward on both lot 44 and 44R Concord, seeking to both have them both rezoned to extensive business. I believe that for the access to the road, for the rear lot, and I understand that that will make the house that's on 44 non-conforming, and we either have to decide whether we're going to turn that into a business or whether we'll be seeking a special permit from the city council or from the ZBA to keep us non-conforming in the house there. One of the things I want to reiterate, and which was somewhat discussed at the site, is my clients bought this property in 2002. Previously, it had been a farm a number of years ago. They had used it primarily, as you saw it there, to harvest all the dead oak trees that were out there, which have turned them into firewood as well as for compost. As I understand it, up until about a year and a half ago, there was no real issues around the area. I know the building inspector has come out and issued violations because my clients were working primarily in those areas. We're also doing some landscaping, which they understood to be under the current zoning. They now discover it isn't, which is why they ceased operations on that, and they're going forward with proposal in front of extensive business. And the building inspector and the zoning violation inspector came out to the P&D site visit last week and repeated to this P&D subcommittee that my clients have cooperated with them extensively in trying to address the issues that could be mitigated on what was there on the property. And we're here tonight to deal, at least the first part, to deal with the issue of changing the business use and the zoning so my clients can continue to operation, but they've been on hold essentially for 9 to 11 months in the landscaping, and then pursue other potentials. One of the issues was raised, and my clients will be looking at it. There appears to be a demand in Gloucester for a contractor's yard that would require a special permit from the city council after the rezoning is granted. They cannot do it unilaterally. They will have to obtain a second special permit anyway. But that's one of the issues they're looking at. There appears to be a need for it. They've been told by other contractors, other members, that there is a need with all the construction. This is right off 50 yards, 65 yards off of Route 128. Although they're residential abutters along Congress Street, their primary abutters are the Cape Ann Animal Aid and the city of Gloucester to the south and southwest. So they're maintaining a buffer between themselves and the Wingershik Inn of about 60 feet to try to mitigate any impact on the inn. And again, we've had the site visits, you've seen the property, you've seen what they've done. And we would ask that this planning board consider recommending it to the full city council that they be allowed to rezone it to extensive business.
Nestor, thank you. I'd just like to recognize Sean. He was very excited when we got started here.
Yeah, I'm just going to recuse myself from the deliberations on this. I'm going to turn off my video and I'll listen for when you folks are done.
Thank you, Sean. So I don't know what happened to Greg, but so
Still here. Sorry.
thank you. No, that's quite all right. So I don't know that much has really changed since our last meeting. I believe we've had pretty good representation from the planning board members as far as site visits go.
I could run through at the site day of the site visit. I took photographs. If there were any members that had not made it to it, they are also publicly available through the planning board drive. So I can just call those up.
Somebody's got their mic open. If you don't mind closing it, maybe that might be you, Mark.
It actually could be me. I'm still in the office, and there's others that are talking. So I'll just quickly show some photos, and I'll mute myself for the time being.
Thank you.
So this is looking back towards Concord Street. The red structure off in the distance is the existing home at 44, and that's the driveway entrance in coming off of Concord Street. Again, it's basically parallel to the lot line on the north side of the property. And I gotta move some things around in my windows so I can get things. There we go. Just to look at overall at the site, there are still a few vehicles, dumpsters, a couple of racks for the storage of materials further on the site. So this is looking basically parallel to 128 to the west, to the limit of where it's been cleared. Again, we've seen this in aerial photographs also from. There was a presentation at the P&D meeting from Max Schenk looking at the evolution of the clearing of the site over the years. It's fairly large footprint, several acres that have been cleared and graded, and I believe have some gravel surface. Not sure of its origin. This is looking down. There's kind of a tiered situation. If you look towards the West Parish School, if you're looking to the south, there's a lower section as well. So there's the level area that as you enter the site, and then there's another access that wraps down to a lower section of the site with various construction vehicles and otherwise on the site. This is again kind of another perspective as it comes back up towards looking back towards the entrance of the site. And again, looking down to the lower area. And again, looking in straight in from the entrance. I think that's most of the shots. One more. Okay.
Thank you, Greg. I think one of the things that was most disappointing to me is, when I had conflicting times to go on the larger site visit, but I was able to attend myself and was hoping to see a much different condition on the property. And as I came back to Gloucester this afternoon, didn't have any problem picking out the equipment through the woods from the highway at 55 miles an hour to see that there is not much had changed in the last 2 or 3 or 4 weeks since we started talking about this. So I don't know if I'd like to take another round of comments from board members on what their thoughts are on this issue. I mean, to me, it's a little bit black and white. And we are in a public hearing setting. I know that we've had a sort of a peculiar representation of people that are in favor that aren't necessarily abutters. We have taken comment from direct abutters, but I am sensitive to the direct abutters on this issue. So if there's comments from the board members prior to opening to public comment, I'd like to have another crack at that. And then we'd see if anybody would like to speak in favor or against the rezoning issue. Mr. Rosen.
So I did get out to the site today. A question that I've got, because if I understand it correctly, the adjacent motel business is already zoned essential business. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So
That's
if
a business,
somebody,
correct.
if this was rezoned to that use, and this perhaps was raised before, and somebody acquired both of those properties and they were both in the same zone, could something like a hotel be developed on that site at that intersection, something much larger? I know that may not be the intent of the current owner, but if this is rezoned, something like that would be possible. Is that correct or not?
Yeah, so there's, again, what's being requested is a zone change, and what goes along with that is every allowance that the ordinance provides. The district has a number of uses that are allowed as of right, some of that require city council special permitting. From a residential use perspective, it's really hotel and assisted living that are possibilities. A 30-unit hotel is actually allowed with a yes. It would involve site plan review from the planning board, but again, there are a number of uses. The more intense they are, the more typically they'd involve a special permit. One of them being also contractor's yard requires a city council special permit. But the outcomes are what's allowed by the ordinance. With it being, as you pointed out, there's also the ability for site assembly for a larger site. And for the one limitation that exists, which I'm not sure that there's been a ton of evaluation, it was asked and on the site visit, the septic capacity of the site, that is something that is a driver for any potential use on the site, because it's not served by public sewer at this point. Otherwise, with extension, again, there's much more possibility.
Okay. But it would seem that if there was an assemblage there, that would be a much more intensive use than the proposed use of the site in the future. And that's a tricky intersection. And then you've got the school that's basically around the corner from this property as well. So those would be my major concerns.
Thank you, David. Beverly?
One of the questions that we raised, and it's an important one, which will come up later after we've heard testimony, is whether or not the site has the capacity for septic systems so that it can be developed in a use other than just a construction yard that doesn't have any bathrooms associated with it. And I took it from Mr. Nestor's additional letter that was in Google Drives today, that in fact, there is a septic system on the site, that some kind of minor improvement has been made on it. But if that's the case, then presumably, or maybe it needs to be confirmed, that septic system could be upgraded and expanded for a more intense use. And it's important for us to know whether or not that's the case, because you'd have it unless and until the sewer system, the sewer line comes up from the school northward onto Concord, you couldn't build the intended use today, which is R20, without a septic system that meets health department standards. So I think it would be helpful to clarify that it does have septic capacity.
There is a septic system on there for the 2-bedroom house. It was a conditional pass before today. As I understand, my client was over talking to Max Shank today and addressed some of the issues Max Shank had. And what's been represented to me is Max has turned it from a conditional pass to a pass. And so yes, there is a septic system on 44, not on 44R, for a 2-bedroom house. What the capacity for an expansion, I do not know. The other option potentially is, I guess it could be done. My client's not anticipating it. I guess you could run a private line down Concord Street to tie into where West Parish School is, but that's not something that we're anticipating, but I guess it's potential there. There's been other private lines run through the city of Gloucester already.
And that's
Why
not
private? Why private?
Beverly, if I don't mind.
Okay.
So, I mean, we're not here to talk about Board of Health issues. We're not here to talk about septic systems. We're talking about rezoning of a parcel that is not in compliance. And until such time that they can demonstrate an R20 use, the use that's before us is non-compliant. And so we really need to not try to solve the applicant's problems. We need to get to the root issue of the rezoning of the parcel or the two parcels. So are there any other comments before Jane, thank you.
Yes, I also made a site visit and I spoke with one of the owners of the parcel. I do have sympathy for the owners and the pickle that they find themselves in. However, I am not, as I stated at the previous meeting, I'm not a fan of curing a zoning violation by rezoning. Furthermore, our purpose as a planning board and the purpose of the zoning ordinance, which I happened to look up today, is to encourage the most appropriate use of land throughout the city. And I think R20 is a perfectly appropriate designation for that area, considering where it is and so on. And I don't think extensive business is an appropriate designation for that location. I know that there's a landscaping business that was being run on that property, like I think in the early days before it was cleared and before zoning violations came to light. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think that's a permitted use and for R20 if you go to city council and get a special permit under the earth removal use. I don't know, Greg, you could back me up on that, but that's so I would really like to see it stay at R20 and hopefully the landscape business can continue, which is not a big deal, but the boat storage, the contractor yard and all the rest of it, I don't approve of. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Any other comments before I open it to the public comment period?
Can I respond to Jane's comments?
Absolutely, Attorney Nestor.
Number one is, one of the reasons we did this is we were under the understanding too that a landscaping business was allowed under R20 and under the definition of farm. We were told, however, it is not. They're considered a contractor business and the code and the statutes seem to back it. So that's one of the reasons why we're trying to correct it, because we were operating a landscaping business, which we now discover is incorrect. So we need to rezone us so we can do that. And I would also submit that I understand your concerns about the appropriate use, but we're talking about 5 acres of land that to a great extent front Route 128, but an extensive business hotel already in the traffic by 128 that I would say that potentially an extensive business versus a residential, if it was turned into some sort of cluster development or whatever, because we're talking 6.25 acres, that this is probably most appropriate, which would mitigate traffic, which we have if you had any kind of residential area out there. I understand the need for the city of Gloucester to increase the housing stock, and I'm sympathetic with that. But I think my clients feel that an extensive business for a contractor's yard in landscaping is probably more appropriate for where it is than adding on residential units at that spot.
Thank you, Attorney Nestor. Greg, do you have a response to Jane's special permit under a landscaping business in R20 special permit?
So there are kind of different classifications of use. And I think when you get into the heavy equipment, storage of outdoor materials, more of a stonemason's yard or a contractor's yard, that's where things diverge a bit. There's certainly the ability for greenhouses, that type of operation. It's that more intense use part of it that, kind of runs into the issue of requiring additional permitting or being potentially prohibited in a residential district. I think, everybody, the fact is the issues that you may have been able to address, if somebody came in with an application and said, this is what we'd like to do, would be the consideration of buffering, how an extensive business use, really affects the margin, the adjoining properties, and that opportunity has been lost. So, what you have now is, a substantial portion of the site cleared, and kind of working backwards from there to permit the use.
And so, Attorney Nestor, to you, sir, To your knowledge, are there any special permits granted to this parcel for those types of uses that Greg just outlined?
No, they can do the forestry, they can do the compost under the R20 as agricultural/farmland. They cannot do the landscaping. And I would just note one thing, which I believe the members saw when we were out there. A lot of the clearing is because most of the oak trees in that area are all dead and so potentially a hazard, which is why they have been harvested by being cut down and sold for firewood, which is why you have the clearing. Before there, and about 6 or 8 years ago, a lot of all oak trees and a lot of Cape Ann were all destroyed. I think it was a gypsy moth. And so that's where the clearing is. And it's not as if we have cleared live living trees. The bulk of the trees that you saw around there now are all dead. And that's what essentially they've been harvesting, which they're allowed to do under I think it's chapter 148 as part of the definition of a farm.
Right. So we don't have the benefit of that knowledge intimately, but thank you for that insight. Any other comments from board members before I open to the public comment? Hearing none. So we are in a public hearing, a continued public hearing on the 44 and 44R rezoning issue. If there anybody in the attendees pool that would like to speak, I'd like to offer people an opportunity that haven't spoken yet before on this issue to raise your hand electronically, state your full name and address for the record, and you'll be recognized for your comments. And please keep them to 3 minutes. And again, this is would like to be in the affirmative for people that are in support of this rezoning consideration. We have one. So Brooke, Greg, if you don't mind. Floor is yours. Can you hear us, Brooke?
Hello?
Yes.
Yep.
Hi, I wanted to introduce myself. My name's Jeffrey Coltajohn. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
My name's Jeffrey Coltajohn. I own 44 Concord Street. I wanted to thank the board for listening to us tonight. Over 20 years ago, we bought this property. We had searched high and low for a place with over the 6 acres needed for a farm. Eric and I are both landscapers, and we had always wanted to have something like this. And we came across it, and in the process of finding it, we did the deed searches and everything. We found that it had always been a farm. So we were very excited. We got it. We moved in. We've been there for over 20 years almost, and it was uneventful to about last year. We sell loom, mulch, and stone, and we do composting and firewood, and we always have. I've actually been in business since 1985. But what happened was, it was uneventful right up to about last year. I think it was March, they shut us down. They came in and said that, we got a cease and desist. And I think Greg Suffalo, through the planning board, and Bill will attest, I instantly got in touch with them. And we were told that under the farm rules, we registered it as a farm. It has always been registered as a farm, that we are allowed, the firewood cutting and the mulching. And what they said is, under the farm rules, when you begin to bring products in that aren't exactly processed on the farm or didn't originate from the farm, then you're not really a farm anymore. I mean, you do some things that are related to farming, but we're landscapers. So we were selling loom and mulch and stone. Obviously, we don't have a sand pit there. So we would bring in materials and then sell it. Same with mulch. So at that time, I went right to Greg and Bill, and I requested a meeting, and I said, I want to comply with you folks. And we've been here for 20 years and been in business a long time, and it's been uneventful until what happened last year. And I said, what can I do to alleviate this problem? I mean, half my business, I'm legal here under farm, half I'm not. he said, Jeff, probably the best thing to do would be to make it legal so we can alleviate everyone's concerns is to apply and change the zoning. So I'm not in half business doing wood and mulch and stone. And then, you know, I do bring in my trucks after work of the day and we store them there and we do bring in materials. So at that point, we made a decision to shut it down and cease and desist and shut the whole business down, which has been quite detrimental to both of us. But I said, let's do it the right way and shut the whole thing down and comply with the town and get with the neighbors. We paid Mark, I hired Mark, who's worked for me for years. And we sent out all the legal notices to the neighbors and no one showed but Roger, who owns the motel. I was there before Roger when he bought the motel. He's a great guy. We've always got along. We've never had really a problem. He knows, and we've agreed that I'll always keep the green belt between where we're working and where his, you know, the hotel is. And then all these other neighbors came in all of a sudden trying to shut the business down. So that was part of our decision to go the right way instead of running half a business as a farm legally. There's been accusations that we're living in trailers there. There's been accusations that, you know, we're letting, you know, people up there ride mini bikes. That's not at all the case. We've always been conscious of the neighbors. What happened is last summer they were resurfacing the highway. We have roughly 2,000 feet of frontage on the highway. They were resurfacing it, and at night they had a night crew which had lights, and they reported that as part of the complaints. I got back with the building department. I said, we even took pictures and we said, you know, those lights aren't us at night. We've always been conscious of the neighbors and mindful of the neighbors, and basically we don't landscape at night. And we tried to explain that, but there's a lot of things been said that we didn't do and wouldn't do. And come to find out, all those violations that were basically the highway department resurfacing the thing. Now, granted, did I bring in loom and mulch and stone? I always thought, like I said from the beginning, that would be allowed because landscaping, farming, you know, we bought it so we could expand our business, which we have. And, you know, we made a conscious decision here to try to do the right thing. We have great intent and we are mindful of the neighbors. I've even gone up and talked to one of the gentlemen and, you know, he's all against it, but he has his own business at his house. I mean, when you're inside the property, when you're there working, you can't see. I mean, in the fall, you can see the highway, as the gentleman Rick had said, but when you're there working during the year, no one can see in there. I have no intention of selling it. I don't want to put a subdivision of houses. We just want to keep the business there that we've always had, and we want to improve on it. Like I say, once Greg and Bill met with us, we began cleaning it up. We've only left the equipment there that we need to maintain the property. I have over the years, you know, let people store their boat or their car or here and there, friends of mine, for free. But in the process of talking with the building department, they expressed the huge need for contractor storage and or storage of any tradesman. We don't have a ton of space. We have almost 8 acres, but, you know, I said, hey, you know, I know everyone I know is in the trade business, and I'm not against, you know, helping a few people out that want to rent some cheap space to have their yards so they don't have to have it in, you know, inside a residential development. I mean, I have a lot of space there. We keep it clean. We've, you know, the one other woman across the street had been complaining that, you know, we're living in the place. I live a quarter mile from there and my partner lives a quarter mile the other way. So we've never lived in any of the trailers or anything. I mean, like I said, we came with good intent. We came suggested by the building department to go before you. And, you know, that's it in a nutshell. I do want to say that through all the talks here, some of the neighbors and some of the board have expressed their concern about, you know, if something would have happened to me or I sold the business or, you know, what would happen? You know, even Roger, who owns the hotel, he said, Jeff, you know, I don't want to see a 50-unit hotel next to my hotel. And I said, you know, we're applying for the EB zoning. So anything that is changed beyond what I do, as the other gentleman had said, has to go before the board anyway with a special permit. So it's not like I can just build a hotel there or something. I mean, we just want to stay in business. I mean, it's been a hard enough time, what everyone's gone through with business, and to be put out of business for the last 11 months has been a hard thing. And we're just trying to do the right thing here. That's all I want to say.
Again, I appreciate your comments, Eric. I understand, you know, the nature of how we got here. And I made this comment in the last meeting. The very basic level, you know, zoning ordinance and districts are about predictability, right? So when you move into an R20 district, there's no predictability that any kind of construction yard or transfer station or storage of anything would happen in your backyard. And that's just a basic tenet. And until such time as somebody makes a complaint with the Inspectional Services Department, then it doesn't change in the last 18 or 19 or however long it's been going on. So I appreciate your comments. I'm glad we took the time to listen to your input. We are still in the public comment period. I'd like to ask anybody else that would like to speak in favor of the rezoning of 44 and 44R Concord Street. Simply raise your hand electronically. You'll be recognized. And we gave the applicant a little bit of leeway time-wise, but we do have a full agenda here this evening. So I'd like to ask to keep their comments brief. So anybody else in favor? Seeing none. So I'd like to ask for comments on that are not in favor of the rezoning. If folks have already spoken in the past, I'd like to let other people get a chance to speak for the first time. If not, I will accept any other further comments that are not in favor of the rezoning of 44 and 44R Concord Street. And just raise your hand electronically, you'll be recognized. Just name and address for the record. You permit Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, just name and address for the record, and you are next in line. Just have to unmute yourself. Should be in the upper right corner of your screen. I don't know if you can help out, Greg or Gemma.
Yeah, the only thing I can do is send requests to unmute, but I can't do much more than that.
You get you more authority.
Can't reach into your computer. It looks like perhaps they're using a different login. Mary Ann Smith.
Yep, looks like it. The Smith family, you are permitted to speak. Looks like Mr. Smith has worked out the mute issue.
Okay, so state your name and address.
You need to close one of your mics, though.
Try that.
So that looping is the one mic just needs to get closed on one device.
Working on it.
Like a 1970s hairband.
I did mute
3 devices.
I did.
Actually.
Yeah, I did mute the second one. So
Go ahead.
hopefully.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
There we go. Yes.
Yes. Go ahead, sir. Name and address for the
My
record.
name is William Harmon. I'm the butter. I live at 40 Concord Street. And we're opposed to any changing the zoning up there. It's a residential neighborhood. The land was prior in my family. It's been in my family for generations. It's always been a farm. It's always been quiet, and we feel any sort of extensive business or anything that might take away from the peace that we have in the neighborhood is not good. We're just totally opposed to any changing of the zoning. It's all residential. It should stay residential. So
Very good.
that's my word.
That's it. Short and concise. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else in the attendees list that would like to speak against the rezoning of this parcel? Sure. Thank you. So, Mr. Burlingham, the floor is yours. Just name and address for the record.
John Burlingham, 36 Concord Street. I'm gonna abutter to the abutter. I am about the school property. I am told I'm a legal abutter. I have a couple of rebuttals on what was spoken of earlier. One is about the lights at night. I have a little background in law enforcement. I was a game warden in Rhode Island, I was shellfish constable here, and I've been active in the military and police work. So I usually know what I'm looking at, and I won't say I don't if I don't. I won't say I do if I don't. In terms of the lights at night, it was equipment working on that property. I can see through the trees, almost all of that property. There's still junk cars and trucks on the property that are all supposed to be removed. There's a Tony's Fruitland truck that's been there, never moved. There's a fifth wheel camper there. There's a utility truck with MF Roberts on the side of it. There's an old ambulance, an old police car, and I can see all this without going on the property. Can't read my notes. As far as my glasses, that'll work. As far as construction or a contractor site goes, and on a need for one, Marshall's is less than a mile down the street. And they have everything there. So it's not necessary in this particular area. And all the trees on the property that were claimed to be dead that were cut down is not true. A great many of them were dead. This is very true because I live with the same problem in my yard and all around my yard, which abuts that property. So it's natural. That's from the gypsy moss when they went through here like an army, literally like an army. I could hear them walking in the grass, crunching, crunching, crunching. And the other night at a site visit, Mr. Holsmith threatened me, not physically, but the quote was, better the devil you know than the one you don't. And if we want, we can build 20 units of housing on this property. And I took that as a threat. I think that was a terrible thing to say to anybody. And the other one is Mr. Coulter-John. When I pressed him about all the vehicles that were up there, which most of them are gone right at the moment, although they all came back the last time, he claimed all the vehicles were his. That's a quote. All those vehicles are mine. He stood right in my yard. He's in my yard 3, 4, 5 times. I didn't keep track of the count. And he stated that fact. And that's just to counter what was said that I consider to be wrong. But I know the difference between construction lights on a highway and a machine backing up and moving around next door to my property. I thank you all for your consideration and your hard work. I know it's a difficult job. Thank you very much. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Burlingham. Anybody else that'd like to speak in opposition of the zoning reconsideration? We can permission Mr. Smith again.
Hi, Robert Smith, 38 Concord Street.
Okay.
I'm John Burlingham's next door neighbor, and I totally agree with everything you have to say about the lights at night and the abandoned cars and all that. As for the highway work, my bedroom is right in the backyard, and I hear the lights, I hear the trucks moving, and it's definitely not from the highway. That's just my opinion. I'm not calling anybody a liar or anything, but I was just trying to, Greg, I was hoping you can answer a couple of questions. I was looking for the definition of a farm, and I'm also looking for a definition of what a junkyard is considered.
I don't know that we appreciate the questions. I don't know that that necessarily has the board's, consideration of the rezoning issue. I mean, right now we're concerned ourselves with an R20 versus an EB. I think the board has done their homework as far as what constitutes a farm and what doesn't. But I appreciate your comments, Mr. Smith. And is there anything else that you'd like to follow up on?
No, I think I'm all set. I just agree with my neighbors totally. I believe I sent you guys an email. Hopefully you got all my concerns with that.
Yeah.
And we are totally opposed to this project.
Okay. Appreciate your input. Any other comments before we move to the next phase of this discussion? Seeing and hearing none, Jane, we'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing.
I make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I think the applicant raised their hand again, if they'd
sorry.
like to make some rebuttal, I guess, if you want to entertain that.
Absolutely, at the buzzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Briefly, I'm not going to address, my client has represented that the trucks there belong to him. Even Mr. Burlingham admitted that a lot of the vehicles that used to be there have been removed. We are trying to comply with what the building inspector has requested. As I repeated before, the building inspector and Mr. Cephalo both conceded that a lot of work has been done to remove a lot of the property that is there. All I can say is that the operation night, when I talked to the building inspector and Mr. Cephalo, there was no complaints, as I understand, about operations at night. There was concern regarding the use of the landscaping business there, and I think we've already beaten that course. So I would just ask that, again, I think an extensive business is more appropriate, is just as appropriate over there as an R20 based on the location. I would ask the board to consider it. And Mr. Holzman did not make a threat saying the devil is what you know versus not for 20. It could potentially, it's 272,000 square feet of land. The building lots are 20,000 square feet in R20. I said in the beginning, my clients don't want residential, they want the extensive business, but it's potential. That's a fact of life, not an argument or a threat.
Thank you, Attorney Nestor. Mr. Colajam, I'd like to offer you an opportunity to rebut any comments, but if you don't mind keeping them brief.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
It seems I did approach John. I do care about what he thinks. I just asked him and told him the business that we're in. Him saying he can see in there, all I know is I spend a lot of time back there in the fall and in the winter. You can slightly see back in there. Most of the year I can't see him, so I know he can't see me. I want to get along with my neighbors. I've always been conscious of that. What hasn't been said here is through all this, we're a business. We support families. We've been there a long time. Like I said, since '85, I've been in business around here. I submitted to this board roughly 40 signatures. And the last time I was before you, someone had commented that these are all people that are random signatures. Every single one of those signatures are Ward 5 West Gloucester people. Some of them are people that need space. Some of them are just people that live right around there. But every one of them, and Mark can show you these signatures in a petition, you know, just saying that they are in favor of this. I know these gentlemen are against it, and I want to work with them. I'm totally willing to agree to certain hours. I certainly don't work up there at night. So, I mean, I'd rather just get along and do this the right way than just try to, I don't know how you say it, do it halfway with, you know, my being a farm and being a landscape business. We're going to do it right. And I think that if we put our best foot forward and try to make this work for everyone, it can work good. Like I said, I'm totally willing to accommodate any suggestions they have on the hours and what we do. And I can guarantee personally that I'm not going to be working there at night, and I can make sure that no one else is. Thank you. Thank you very much.
At the discretion of the chair, I'd like to recognize Mary Ann Smith. Again, just please keep your comments brief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All due respect to Attorney Nestor and Mr. Coltajon.
Ma'am, before you start, I want you to
Yes.
direct your questions through the chair and not to the applicant or the applicant's representation.
Yes, sir. Mary Ann Smith, 38 Concord Street. We are adjacent abutters to the property in question. Several times this evening and at the last two meetings, it's been noted that West Parish School and the animal shelter are primary abutters. I don't exactly know what a primary abutter is. However, there are numerous adjacent abutters that are privately owned residences on Concord Street. There's been no mention of them. Every single one of those individuals signed a petition of opposition to the rezoning of this property. That was submitted on, I believe, Tuesday night or Tuesday, maybe Wednesday afternoon. I would like it noted that each one of the adjacent abutters on Concord Street, direct abutters, signed that petition. I would also like to mention that Concord Street is a very narrow, windy road with no sidewalks. An elementary school at the other end, lots of traffic already from people that use this portion of Concord Street as a cut through. Earlier, it was mentioned that they feel most people that go to the lumber yard will use the exit. I would like to see how they come up with that information, because we see the volume of traffic that's coming from Essex, coming from West Gloucester, using this end of Concord Street as a cutoff, as a cut through. So again, it's a residential neighborhood. Yes, we do have a few businesses in the area, but the individuals that live on this street have submitted a petition of opposition. So I just would like that noted.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Okay, anybody else that hasn't commented that's not in favor? Okay. Greg, any other?
Yeah, I just want to recognize, you know, for folks that maybe haven't gone to the city website, to the planning board, we are in receipt of that petition. There was a petition filed with both the planning board and the city council that had 35 signatures. Addresses are displayed in opposition. And as well, I believe along with the initial application, Mr. Nestor also supplied a petition that also had the supporters that Mr. Coltajon had mentioned. And also letters have been submitted from Mr. Burlingham, Mr. Smith, Mr. Harmon. There was also a cataloging of activities at one point that was supplied as a supplement from, I believe, Mr. Harmon, with, you know, again, just citing truck activities or other activities on the site with times associated with them. Again, those are his observations. as well as you saw the submissions that came in prior to the last planning board meeting, and they're all available in the planning board Google Drive.
Thank you, Greg. Jane, you want to take a crack at a petition or motion to close the public hearing?
Yes. Were we in a public hearing?
A
We
continued
opened a
public hearing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Yes, I make a motion that we close the public hearing regarding 44 and 44R Concord Street.
Thank you. Second,
I'll second.
thank you, Beverly. All in, roll call vote, please, for Mr. Cadamatore.
Member Noonan,
Yes.
member McCarl,
Yes.
member Bookin,
Yes,
member Cook,
Yes.
member Henry, abstention, member Remsen,
Yes.
and member Rosen.
Yes.
Thank you. We've given this issue a fair amount of consideration. As I mentioned earlier, to me, it's a fairly black and white issue. Is there further discussion among board members? Seeing none, Jane, would you like to make a motion in the affirmative, please?
Yes.
So this is a recommendation to the city council, so it would be
Right.
a motion to
vote-
recommend amending the zoning ordinance as it's stated on the agenda.
I don't want to amend the zoning ordinance.
It will be a positive motion, and then reflective of each member's position on the application would
I
be
get it. Okay.
affirmative to recommend. And if it is no, then it will go forward as a motion that fails and represent not recommending to do so.
Okay. And also to the public, I'm sorry I was jumping up and down. I had a little bit of a canine emergency in my office and I was trying to get rid of the dog. I move that we recommend amending the Gloucester zoning ordinance to rezone 44 and 44R Concord Street, Assessors Map 229 lots 5 and 2 from R20 district to EB district.
So we have a motion. Do you have a second? Beverly, we can't hear you.
oh, I'll second it in order for us to be able to vote on it.
So we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please, Mr. Cadamatore.
Member Noonan,
No.
member McCarl,
No.
member Bookin,
No,
member Cook,
No.
member Remsen,
No.
member Rosen.
No.
Okay. 6 opposed.
And one abstention.
Motion fails, and one recusal. Motion fails.
Okay. Thank you for your time, Attorney Nestor. Okay, so we have disposed of Upper Banjo Pond on the continued public hearing agenda. Next, under other business, a decision to adopt a new singular wireless PCS LLC DBA AT&T for wireless communications facility special permit to install a small cellular installation on National Grid utility pole proximate to 232 Atlantic Street, Assessors Map 256, Lot 52. So this is another business. I don't know that we necessarily have representation, but I think.
No, so I worked with Attorney Pari at the last meeting of the planning board. You approved the small cellular application by special permit at the locus. This is very similar to the format that we utilized. You recall perhaps last year or maybe a year or 16 months ago. There were 3 applications very similar. These are small applications that are affixed to existing telephone pole infrastructure. So this meets the same format with the board's articulation of their findings and the issuance of the permit. So if there's any Any typos, I leave that to Jane. Otherwise, I think it's in good form.
You
And
did
can
great.
just-
I didn't find any typos and I really read it.
Thank you, Jay.
So you can just make a motion to adopt that decision.
I make a motion that we adopt the decision for new singular wireless special permit to install a small cellular installation on a national grid utility pole at 232 Atlantic Street.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Henry. Roll call vote, please.
Member Noonan,
Yes.
member McCarl,
Yes.
member Bookin,
Yes,
member Cook,
Yes.
member Henry,
Yes.
member Remsen,
Yes.
member Rosen.
Yes.
Okay, I'll have the chair endorse that and file it.
Thank you. Next, under other business, is a road improvement plan, release of covenant, 15 Hutchins Court, Assessors Map 125, Lot 102. I don't know if we have anybody here to talk about
We
that.
do, we have attorney representing. I'll allow him to speak.
Very good. Robert, the floor is yours.
Greg, hi, my name is Rob Ansel, and I've appeared before this board on this project. We are seeking a Form M release on what is an A&R lot. We thought we had complied with all of the planning board's requirements for these 3 lots, and we found out this afternoon that we had not satisfied the requirements of the Gloucester Fire Department. We have a closing scheduled, and we are exceedingly confident that we are going to comply with the request of the fire chief. We received an email tonight at 5:04, which Greg was copied on, which is to my client Kyle, who's also on this call, and says Deputy McRobb did the site inspection and can work with you directly on this. He has included on this email, he was told by personnel on site that the required work would be completed, so someone there is also aware of what is required. What I believe is required is that there is a there's a turnaround area that's on the lot. It's a gravel area, and I believe that it needs to be made a foot or so larger than as it stands. I don't know what the actual requirement is, but my request would be that I know that this is not your standard procedure, but I'm wondering if you would do this, is that if you would consider signing the Form M, the Form M would be held by the planning department and not released to my client until Greg receives confirmation from either Deputy McRobb or directly from Fire Chief Smith that we've complied with their requirements. I believe that the requirement is a very minor requirement. I wish that I had known prior to 5 o'clock tonight that we did not satisfy the fire department's requirement. The only thing that is there's an area shown on the approved plan, which shows that area. Our engineer, John Judd, had stamped a plan that he says that it complies with the requirements, and he was specifically referencing the fire department turnaround area. So I don't know what that requirement is, but I'm very concerned about losing a closing because I haven't been able to comply with this requirement that we don't know what it is. And if we don't, if there is a need to go back in front of the planning board in 2 weeks, we'd be more than happy to do that. So I don't know what your procedures are. I understand that we're asking for something that perhaps is not within your standard requirements, but I'm very confident that we've followed all of your rules and regulations. It's been a very successful project where a number of beautiful homes were built. This is our last lot, and I don't know what the flavor of the board is, but that is what our request is, which is to sign the Form M, not to have it released until your planning director receives a written confirmation from the fire department that you're satisfied with their requirements. And we have received all of our other sign-offs from the Conservation Commission and Board of Health, et cetera.
Thank you. Yes, Attorney Stanstel. Greg, if you want to just bring up the board to.
Yeah, I'd actually like to hear from either Kyle or Frank to understand who met with Deputy McRobb. His description to me is that it's not off by a foot or so. It was off by several feet. It is the emergency turnaround. I'm sympathetic really only for the future homeowners at this point, because these issues were raised on August 11th of this year.
Right.
We were here 2 weeks ago. We're in the same situation of trying to close out the final issues. It may be minor grading issues and some establishment of more gravel at the end of the turnaround. But we've been here before. We've been here before on the first release of this project. Every step of the way, we've kind of been faced with this same timeline of, the hope of, can we, do this tonight, make a decision and put it in my hands to then again, wait for, final confirmation. I do think it's probably minor at this point. I really hope it is, because again, it's been a long road, no pun intended. But I would like to understand who met with Deputy McRobb on the site, because he seemed to be very clear to me that there was an indication of what needed to be done, and that field measurements were made and they were not consistent with the plan. So I don't know if that's Kyle or Frank.
Kyle's got his hand up, so let him speak.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep, just
It's,
again, name.
Kyle Barnard.
Yep.
Kyle Barnard, from Boxford, Mass. I'm one of the developers of the property up on Hutchins Court. Frank, my partner Frank, met with the deputy up on Hutchins Court earlier this week, and they reviewed the space. I don't believe the deputy was aware of exactly what the layout of the fire truck turnaround was. So I had John Judd resubmit the as-built plan, which overlays the proposed fire truck turnaround. And John certified that it was built to the specifications that were on the original plan and to the right size. What I believe the confusion was is the current homeowner on 21 has a big pile of wood chips, which is sitting partially on their lawn and partially on the fire truck turnaround. We've asked them to move it off to the side. There's some remnants of that. So Frank indicated that we would clean that up and make sure, double check that the size of the turnaround is the same as it was when we had the as-built done. The client up there, or the homeowner up there, has been doing some landscaping work. So when I was talking to John Judd this morning, he said, no, it's built to where it was supposed to be built. So what we'd like you guys to do is to sign off on the Form M, and as Rob was saying, hold it, and then I can get John Judd and the chief up there maybe tomorrow or early next week to try to show everybody that everything is within compliance. And then anything that needs to be cleaned up, we can go back in there and clean it up, and have the homeowners on 21 stay off of the turnaround area with their materials.
Okay. Kyle, thank you.
And also, Mr. Chairman, by way of background, last Tuesday, the January 11th, there was an email from John Judd to the planning department that said, "Hi, Greg, Kyle, and Frank. Please see the attached plan showing the final site conditions We were at the site this morning and verified that the top coat asphalt was installed required to the required 20-foot width. The site appears to be constructed in accordance with the approved site plan. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Greg?
Yeah, I don't know when this material, again, the material was there back in August. I don't know if this is an ongoing thing, but it's an easement area. Clearly, the homeowner doesn't seem to be aware of that, which is a concern because this is the point where, this is it. There's easements, there's responsibilities of the 4 homes. And I don't know if it needs to be demarcated in some way, but that's its purpose. And, again, if there was material there this morning, I don't know when John went to the site. And if you're saying that this is something that just arrived, I don't know how many people that are doing a lot of landscaping right now. But it seems to be that it was something there several weeks ago before the request. And the as-built plan came in this week and said that it was built to spec. So I'm at the disadvantage. I'm hearing one thing from the deputy that was on the site, and he made it clear to me that there was, it was clear as to what needed to be done and that more work needed to be done, whatever that may be. But then I continue to get representations that everything's fine. So I'm just kind of stuck in the middle of hearing, 2 stories.
So this is not a public hearing. This is not a continued public hearing. This is under other business. And we've continued, my opinion on this issue is that we knew going into Hutchins Court, this was going to be a complicated effort. I believe it has changed hands at least once or twice. We've had continued issues with proposals as built, not complied with, and I am content to wait till all the other oversight, fire department, everybody else that goes up and puts eyes on this thing and says this is correct, that we do not take any action. There's not going to be any release of a Form M until things are squared away. And the frustration level with me is to the point where you gotta demonstrate that things are executed and squared away before this board is, at least in my opinion, as one member, gets the thing squared away. Any other discussion?
My only other request, and thank you for your comments, is that I also have heard two sides, and I think that there has been a breakdown in communication. I have and Kyle is on the phone, a very caring, compassionate, thoughtful, intelligent builder who does care about the project, and I've worked with him for years on a number of other projects. He builds a great house, and I totally 1,000,000% understand where you're coming from, and I also hear where the board is going with this. But what I would like to do is see if collectively if there are any other additional issues that are outstanding other than the fire department, so that we don't end up doing this again in 2 weeks. We do care, we are thoughtful, we are responsive, and this is a difficult site, but there are beautiful, outstandingly beautiful homes here, and there are happy homeowners. So my client has done a great job on what is a fairly difficult but beautiful parcel of land. So I don't know if Greg knows of any other issues that may be outstanding other than the fire department. And unfortunately, John Judd needed to go to another hearing, but we don't know of anything. And what I really want to do is take the next 2 weeks to make sure that we have addressed any and all issues which the board may have. That I think at this point we should know what those issues are.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Greg. I mean, this was approved when initially?
Quite some time ago.
Right. And so
I
there,
mean, again, I appreciate, again, I have nothing personally against Mr. Pirano or Mr. Bernard. Every step of the way, I am asked, what is the next step? You know, you've kind of represented them at the last minute in each one of these scenarios. We've reinvented the wheel 4 times. So from a process standpoint, I have emailed, I have outlined what the concerns have been. Again, not even when there was a hint of a request for this last release in August, I articulated the same 3 issues: the road grade and whether or not road grades were missed in the vicinity of 15, the culvert and whether or not, because the grading on the site on 15 departed from what it was originally proposed to be, and whether or not the culvert was intact. Photographs were submitted to Ryan Marks, I think yesterday or today. Again, we were at the same point 2 weeks ago, and it said, let's take care of these things early in the process. And again, I've got 5 emails from the fire department, from Kyle, from John Judd, from the engineering department today, going back and forth on these issues. So I asked, you know, what's the intended closing date of this last lot?
You're asking?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your.
Yep, sorry. And I'm not being argumentative. I
No,
again,
I didn't understand
nothing
it,
against
but
the client. I'm just curious
Our
where we
closing,
are.
it is scheduled now for Monday because we thought we would get our sign off tonight. And I understand where we are with that. Clearly, it's not going to be on Monday, and we're gonna need to get an extension. So it will be simultaneously with the sign off from the planning board.
okay, and just for clarifications, this board has submission standards. Typically, it's 48 hours prior to a meeting to get, you know, board members up to speed on those issues. I mean, it's almost insulting to me that this thing dates back to August, and we're having this type of respect of the work that this board does and asking for, you know, things that haven't happened. It's been clearly articulated through the planning department. And I mean, so we're happy to demonstrate flexibility. We've got a track record of that, but once you push and don't respect that, then the onus is on you to get your house in order, frankly, sir.
And I think part of that house in order is that, you know, maybe on our team, we have failed to sufficiently get John Judd involved earlier with submitting communication to you, and that's on us. And it certainly has not been our intention. I wasn't part of your August letter, Greg, not that I asked to be or that I was expected to be, but if we have 3 issues from that, assuming what we submitted to you at the last moment tonight is sufficient, is there anything else that you can see that you would?
I think at this point, it's confirmation from the fire department that they're satisfied with the turnaround.
Okay, and how do I go about asking to be on your next agenda?
You've just asked. We will, I mean, it's a continued item. It was on the last agenda, and it will be continued to the next regular meeting, which is February 3rd.
Okay, and I'm just in closing, I'm sorry, we do care. We have tried. We look like the developer that is looking to run over City Hall. I do a lot of development work. That's not who my client is. I know you don't know my client, you don't know me, but that is an honest representation. We are trying, and we do care about this project. It's environmentally sensitive. There were a lot of moving parts with it for a relatively small project. I think one of the things that was difficult from our standpoint is that although there are recorded plans, there's no recorded decision because it's not a subdivision. There are 3, you know, extensions of an old Hart Road public way thing. So it wasn't your standard bonding requirement and release and standards, and it comes in from a procedural standpoint a little bit strange. Other than the plan, there's there's not a lot of well, certainly publicly recorded records that are to go by. So, thank you.
So this is a perfect opportunity to demonstrate your follow throughness to our next meeting, and we look forward to signing your form in.
Okay, and I, you know, Greg, just so you know that the deed to this lot will state that it's subject to the easement for the turnaround area shown on the plan, and that area is to be.
But that property's already been deeded, correct?
Right, and
Yeah.
it is shown as that, so.
Yep.
I mean,
Okay.
it's on that, and, you know, obviously, I have no idea that there's stuff on that area, but it needs to be removed. And I assume that it is the correct size, but we'll make sure that it is.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys' time.
Thank you. Greg, we don't have to make any sort of formal extension of this. Okay, when you can unmute yourself, you can tell me.
Not a public hearing item, so we can continue that to the next meeting.
Fantastic. So seeing no other things on the agenda, I'd like Mr. McCarl to make a motion to adjourn.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Second, please.
Second.
I'll give it to Beverly. She's been quiet tonight. Motion to roll call vote, please.
Member Noonan,
Yes, please.
member McCarl,
Yes.
member Bookin,
Yes.
member Cook,
Yes.
member Henry,
Yes.
member Remsen,
Yes.
and member Rosen.
Yes.
Okay, we'll see you in February.
Good night, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
David,
Thank you.
I don't know why I'm thrown off by your shirt. Very
Oh,
Monsignor-ish.
he is looking